in the steel industry, you're not making pillows, right? So it's hard work. The environment is hot, nasty, dirty, and inherently dangerous, right? So, I mean, you're dealing with, in the melt shop, you're dealing with steel up to 3,000 degrees. Everything's heavy.
For your own safety, you are reminded to stand behind the yellow line.
Welcome to Safety Factor. My name is Ben Hanks, and today we're talking about how we can create safer steel mills. I'm joined by Michael Skipper, General Supervisor of Rail Mill Operations at Evers North America, a leading producer of engineered steel products for rail energy and industrial end markets. Mazzella's Jim Warren, Director of Steel Segment, and Chris Ross, Mazzella Key Account Manager for Steel Sales. Thanks for joining, guys.
Thanks. Very well. Glad to be here.
Can you guys tell me a bit about your background working in the steel industry? Mike, we could start with you.
I've been in the steel business for 18 years. Started out as a crane technician. So I worked with numerous service companies and eventually moved into some maintenance and reliability positions internally within some steel businesses, as in such Everest Steel here in Pueblo, Colorado.
Myself, I've been with Mazzella for a year. Before that, I was at a crane service company for 19 years. Serviced steel mills, aluminum mills, paper mills. And then prior to that, I worked for a steel mill for 9 years. I spent 4.5 years in the rolling mill and 4.5 years in the crane department.
Myself, 12 years I was in the graphite electrode business, production and sales of graphite electrodes. And then prior to that, since 1993, I was in with a leading steel producer in the melting area. Started out entry level in the melt shop and then left as a melting supervisor, 2011.
Okay, so what are some of the most significant safety concerns associated with steel mills today?
Well, the biggest thing that everybody's pushing right now is no touch, right? So they're trying to get the people away from the safety concerns and the safety hazards, right? So whether it's no touch tools for lifting and rigging, no touch electrode handling, that kind of thing. That's the biggest thing that I notice right now.
No, I agree. I think, also one of the concerns is it's the elimination of hazards. So if they can't eliminate them, then they're trying to mitigate them the best they can. Like Jim mentioned, with tools, process, procedures that they can use.
So what are some of those hazards that we're trying to eliminate or mitigate?
I think it's overhead cranes, right? I think it's lifting equipment. I think there's slips, trips, and falls.
Hand injuries.
Walking, working surfaces, hand injuries, things like that, right? I mean, we've used quite a bit of the no-touch tools, within our facility, and I think that's helped us reduce some of our safety incidents surrounding hands drastically, by keeping the team members' hands away from the hazards, right? You're not picking up chains, you're not moving the load. You actually have something to push and pull with versus having your hands do that work for you.
Yep. One of the things that has always been one of my favorite sayings is, in the steel industry, you're not making pillows, right? So it's hard work. The environment is hot, nasty, dirty, and inherently dangerous, right? So, I mean, you're dealing with, in the melt shop, you're dealing with steel up to 3,000 degrees. Everything's heavy. There's nothing that's not heavy.
Yeah, right? Everything's heavy. You're dealing with high power, high temps. So you're like Jim says, you're in a zone that's inherently dangerous, and you're just.
And when you go to use it, you want it to be safe the first time, right? You don't have that second chance or second opportunity to make sure that you do something correct, right? If you don't do it right that first time, it could potentially, cause a major risk or impact to you or the company or your team.
Okay, so speaking of you don't want to do something a second time, let's talk a little bit about the history of steel mills. Historically, I know that steel mills have not been the safest place. And, in 1970, when OSHA was established, they became significantly safer. Can you walk us a bit through the history of steel mills and how they've improved today to become safer workplaces?
Well, I can tell you the mill that I worked at in 94 when I started, we really didn't have safety harnesses, right? Man lifts, you got in a man lift and you just went up, right? If you needed something moved, you just grabbed it and moved it, right? There was no SOP or anything that was a safe procedure to be able to JSAs even, right?
Yeah,
How many JSAs do you guys have today versus when you first started, right?
Absolutely. And that's something we preach to our new hire team members, right? As soon as they come in the door, they're going through their new hire training, right? Is looking for those hazards and what can we do to assess them and mitigate them.
Yeah, you're right. And it's like Jim's point. I know that in the early 1990s when I started, it's not that safety wasn't important, but at the time, the push was on for production. I mean, safety was mentioned, safety was discussion, but it was not didn't have the focus or the push that it really does now. And that's evolved over time. You look at the severity of the injuries, dramatically reduced over time just because the refocusing and reshifting to that be safe, you know.
I think trainings came a long way too. You know, I think years ago, it was not so much
huge
as a forefront of our mind, right? Of making sure that, you know, we trained in forklifts or we trained in cranes or we trained in rigging. And, you know, you had this small group of training, but nothing as vast as it is now or in depth for that matter.
Yeah.
Well, then requiring their certifications. The guys
Yes,
have
sir.
to be signed off.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, if you're not signed up, you don't do it. If you're not qualified, you don't do it. It's you know, in the early days of steel mill, you were
Just did it.
Yeah,
you
you
were
just
just jack of all trades.
something was in the
master
way
of
you
none,
did it, right? There was, you know, no, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying in the mid 90s it was as bad as before we even had OSHA when you had, you know, there was 30 guys waiting at the gate for a job. You know what I mean? And somebody died and they were like, oh, grab Greg Ben, he bring him in now, right? It wasn't that bad, but like I said, it was just, you just did what you had to do in order to get the product out the door.
Yeah, the focus was on operations, tonnage. I mean, you were focused on tonnage. You wanted to be as productive and efficient and no time lost. I mean, and it's really been amazing to see over the past, and really specifically over the past 5 to 10 years, the absolute shift in the industry.
And don't get me wrong, though. I mean, I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
No.
Right. But when I was talking about like JSAs, right? I mean, you know, just over the years that I've spent and the amount of JSAs and the procedures, pre-jobs, right? Pre-job procedures and everything that you go through, lift plans.
Yes.
All that stuff now, you know what I mean? All that is a good thing, right? Because not only does it help with safety, but it also helps with pre-planning the whole project itself and seeing what's going to happen, how long it's actually going to take, how much it's actually going to cost.
Yep.
Right. To before it was, like I said, get it done. Oh, you need a crane? You need to go put the crane up? You run outside, you grab the 65-ton RT, you bring it in the bay and you pick up whatever it is. And you're like, oh crap, I forgot to put this. I forgot to put the outriggers out. Or it was just whatever. Right.
And I think it came along too with the more we understood human behaviors, right? And understanding exactly, you know, how our brains function and what amount of risk, you know, that we induce ourselves, right? By not being repetitious in how we move or how we operate.
Yeah.
And it goes back to where when you, like Jim says, when you plan these jobs now, when you follow the protocols, you can actually identify potential delays, potential hazards,
Right.
so you can time your job much better than you did in the past, where you would guesstimate an 8-hour job, not foreseeing, you know, what could happen, and that 8-hour job becomes 12 because you didn't plan for certain things. It helps a lot with the planning move forward.
Yep.
So what do you think helped refocus the industry? Like what changed that mindset?
That's you know, I don't know if there's one thing that you could look at. I believe corporations started paying a lot more attention to, you know, lost work time, days, injuries. I mean, insurances. I mean,
I was getting ready to go there was insurance, right?
Insurance is a huge motivating factor.
Insurance, workers' comp, all of those things, right?
Exactly.
I think we started to realistically view what that full cost of safety looks like.
Yeah. But when they started having to record right? Record all your numbers and all your data and everything like that. And it, again, I'm not saying that companies didn't care about you, but when they started seeing all that data in front of them now,
That
right?
transparency.
Yeah. Right. And even in 94, when I first started, we had computers, of course, right? But we weren't into them the way that we are now.
Right.
Right. Everything now is logged and entered into the system, whatever that is. Right. And then once they see all those numbers and they see, oh crap, we had, across our organization, we had 200 hand injuries over this last year because we were pushing and pulling, right, with crane moves and everything like that. That's real data. That's live data that's actually happened to their people. And now when you bring that up to the upper echelon management, now they're like, okay, we got to do something.
Well,
right?
it's like society too. I mean, society's become so hooked on analytics. Analytics drives everything. They want to know anything that they can document, anything that they can put numbers to, they're putting numbers to. And this was a huge push for them as well to document and trend, like Jim says. They trend it, and what can we do? It's not only as important to be the most productive facility in the world now. It's also a medal or an honor to be the safest.
The safest, for sure.
Yeah, every mill that I can't. Last year alone, I think I went to 26 different mills in the country, right? And every single one of them, I don't care where I was, the first thing you see when you pull into the gate is lost time accidents.
Yeah.
And then how many days it's been since they're recent. Yeah. Most of them were zero. You know what I mean?
That's good.
Zero as far as zero accidents, right?
Right.
But it's been, 300 days or 200 days or whatever. So they're proud of that number now, because that means that, hey, not only do we take care of and pay our people well, but also we want to make sure that they go home to their families at night. There's a large steel company that starts with the letter N, and every one I go to, they have on one of the buildings. Now I'm talking the buildings outside. They have pictures of their employees and their kids. Right? I mean, that says a lot.
Well, I think that's probably a fair thing, right? Is that the shift was probably largely due to the care for people. I think when the care for people changed versus the care for tonnage changed, I think that's where we started getting some of those things where we took pictures where we were proud of our families and proud of our teammates and proud of the numbers that we achieved on being safe and going home every day with all of our fingers and things like that. But also in doing that, you're producing.
Yeah.
Right? Because the safer you are is proven that the more effective you are at productivity.
Yeah.
I agree.
So what are some of the technologies that are being implemented in steel mills now that's helping make them safer workplaces, safer for the employees?
Ooh. I like some of the forklift hidden sensors and things like that, right? Where you come around some of the corners and as soon as it picks up on a body or some type of an object, the lights go off and it flashes and some kind of a sound, goes off to let you know that, hey, someone's around the corner or a forklift's coming or something like that. I think that's huge. I can't tell you how many times I've been inside of a shop, right? And you're going through a walkway, you open up a swing gate thinking everything's okay. And as soon as you step out, all of a sudden, boom, here comes a forklift or even a person, right? When you walk into another individual.
Yeah.
It happens more than we think about, right?
And you bring up a good point too. I mean, you think about it, guys. It wasn't that long ago. We didn't even know what a swing gate was. We didn't know what a dedicated walkway was.
Right.
And it's that shift. And then you're also getting into so much. The industry's progressing, and the availability of products is progressing so fast to go to automated systems and preventative systems. We've got a number of them ourselves that we can provide.
So some
to
of
customers.
the things I've done in the past, I've put lasers on the crane, right? So they're laser indicators on the floor, light systems that run the whole bridge of the crane, right? So they illuminate the floor wherever the crane is. Audible alarms, crane 21 moving west. It would actually enunciate that throughout the plant. Like I said, just different alarms. Put in limit switches on different parts of the runway that actually lower gates I mean, there's a lot of automation and stuff like that can go into this.
I think some of the coolest things I've seen within the crane business is some of the electronic pre-shift inspections for the cranes, to where they're tied into the crane itself, so you can't actually operate it till you complete that inspection. So you ensure, right, that the team members that are, operating these pieces of equipment have went and visually verified that some of these things are safe. Not only for themselves, but the teammates around them that are working in that area. So I think that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah. Like I said, the automation is limitless. I mean, the engineering, you young guys are coming up with some really cool stuff now.
You whippersnappers.
And Jim, you mentioned the no-touch systems before. Can you tell me a little bit about like what exactly are those and how do they work?
Yeah, so with lifting and rigging, we'll start there. So, you have push-pull tools, right? They're basically big hooks, and they can be various lengths. And that's so you can keep your hands away from, heavy objects, right? So if you're picking something up with an overhead crane, a forklift, anything, right? You would utilize these no-touch tools to reach out, grab that piece of equipment. So now it's putting distance between soft flesh and a steel object or whatever, right? Then we look into our electrode handling business, and we have the no-touch system with that. We completely take the floor, the melt shop day guys and everybody out off the floor, and we're doing everything on that with the crane, right? So we're adding stick to the column to be able to continue melting steel. But we do all that through that no-touch system, right? We completely take everybody away from that. So there's no human interaction that's required in it.
And I think that helps too, as more companies develop sway control systems and things like that for overhead cranes. You don't have the risk anymore of operators or new operators. As they progress into these cranes, they're swinging the loads or they're swinging the hooks into.
You talking about smart features, kind of?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, as they're controlling the trolley and bridge and things, so there's not so much of a swing of the load block, right? Mm-hmm. You're able to smoothly control how you hoist into something and pick up something and control that load wherever you're taking it.
Yeah, especially with the cranes, right? So that was another thing that we used to do, and we still do with Mozilla is, we have no-fly zones where we can actually take an object. If you have a building or if you just wanted a temporary object, right? We can make the crane. You can run the crane as fast as you want. It gets to a certain point, it'll actually slow down and stop until you go around it, right? We can make that permanent or temporary. Anti-snag, right? So that's a big thing in the automotive industry. They leave the slings attached to the dies, unfortunately, sometimes. And then they'd go to bridge and they'll actually flip it over. So once you get to a certain degree of side pull or side load on the crane, it shuts it off. So yeah, there's all kinds of smart stuff out there for that.
I think one of the coolest things too that we've come up with is that electrode adding process. I mean, being a former steel producer, we probably, used to climb on top of the furnaces. You're on top of a 3,000 degree oven, basically making steel.
You did your ads on top of the furnace?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we first started, and you're walking that narrow arm, carrying a chain wrench, and you're flying in a 3,000 pound electrode hanging over your head, screwing it together with a chain wrench.
Hey, Chris, what were you tied off to?
We couldn't even spell tie. But it was the process, right?
Right. That's how you did it.
It wasn't that we were circumventing anything. It was just that's the way it was done. And that was, and it's, I can remember going to the early automation, early robots, everybody complained about the additional time, right? First, it's taking me, we used to be able to run up there and add a stick in 2.5 minutes and be down, power back on. Now it's taking us 4.5. Well, it's like anything else in the steel industry, right? You work with it enough, you get the time step.
That's
and
right.
not only that, I mean, the potential for injuries, I mean, I think I know twice I tore rotator cuffs and shoulders jerking on wrenches and sand buckets before we had automation. So
think about what that would have saved, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What if it would have been the last tear?
Yeah.
Right? We wouldn't have been able to use that arm again, right? And that's what I think the focus is we can't forget about making sure that it's people. And at the end of the day, it's people driven. So if you would have lost that arm, what about grabbing your wife or your grandkids or something like that, right? You lose that ability. So making sure that we gain that opportunity back without having that risk out there is huge.
Yeah, and then you also look at the simple fact, it makes guys more aware of their job when they're having to run that piece or operate that piece of equipment. They're not as complacent as they were in the past. I mean, unfortunately, one of the last electrode additions I made on top of the furnace, we were sent out there with the power still on. So, I mean, you're talking about
What?
34,500 volts. It's live coming in, and miraculously, neither one of us were hurt. But, unfortunately, people get complacent in a routine. Where if they're running that equipment, or if that equipment is basically running itself, guiding itself, you take that potential hazard out. You eliminate that.
Yep.
So,
Well, what you mentioned is something that it has been more of a known now within the crane and steel and business is TOF and fall restraint and fall rescue systems and things like that.
Yep.
Years ago, you said you wouldn't really see a harness, right? Now you're starting to see cranes and things like that becoming sold within packages of ensuring that we have horizontal lifelines and things like that with them. So as you know that maintenance team members and operators and things like that, as they board them, they have that ability.
Like I said, when I started, it wasn't. To get a harness was. They're like, why do you want one of those? You wuss, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But now try and go over 4 foot off the ground and have somebody see you.
yeah, I dare you.
In a mill.
Yes.
I dare
and
you.
see what
Yes.
happens, right? Now 4 foot off the ground, and they're like, "What are you doing? Get out of my mill!" You know what I mean? You got to be tied off. What are you doing? So,
Yeah, and it's so funny. Things that we all kind of didn't think about, just simple stuff. The apparel that we wear, the
Yeah.
PPE that we wear. We laugh because back in the day we didn't have those options. You had a hard hat and a jacket, but you didn't wear FR clothing. You didn't have any of that stuff. It was just. But that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, the focus shifting back to taking care of your people. And that becomes the cost associated. It's a whole lot easier to keep them safe and healthy than it is to pay for an accident.
yeah,
Right?
We have cardinal rules now, right?
yeah.
That we train our team members on. So you don't have that ability anymore. If you do break that 4 foot rule, you're gone. Right? There's no question whatsoever. Right? If you do certain things, if you cross overhead crane, guardrail systems, right? That's a cardinal rule. You're no longer employed. Some of those things that are put in motion now deters us away from taking that shortcut and trying to speed that time back up that we think in our mind we're losing, but we're not actually losing.
Right.
Well, part of that has to do with they want to make sure that the consequences are severe enough that you understand they know they care about you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. I don't think that they don't want you to not be safe, or they don't want you to be safe because they're worried about their numbers. I know we said that earlier as far as kind of what brought that around nowadays, but the bottom line is they want to make it severe enough that you understand that when you do that, the end result or the consequences that can be involved in that are so much worse than anything else. That
Yes.
if you screw around and you do this, that's that cardinal. You're gonna get kicked out of here.
Yeah,
Yep.
you need to get out before something actually happens to you,
Yes,
because
right.
obviously you don't
Exactly.
respect your own
and we're
safety.
not- and it becomes like you said. Then it's the focus is not, hey, you're going to make us look bad. Is we're going to prevent you from
Yeah.
tragically harming yourself or
anyone else.
losing your life.
Yeah.
And it's preventative.
So what are some of the barriers that might be there for some steel mills starting to adopt new technology? I know that historically steel mills have been kind of slower adopters of technology. So what are some of the barriers, and how can people help push past those?
I would say, from my experience, a lot of it surrounds cost, right? When you start getting into some of the older facilities, trying to upgrade them or modernize them to the ways that we are facing now is quite difficult, because you're talking an exuberant amount of money that has to be projected out into $1 billion facility. So how do you do that in waves, right? Because we can't just come up with $1 billion and say, here you go, let's just upgrade all these cranes or upgrade this furnace or upgrade these meal stands or what, right? But I think a lot of it surrounds what you mentioned earlier was procedures and policies and going back to the training, ensuring that we put some formats in place to kind of mitigate some of those things and train against them until we can slowly project that money where it needs to go.
So tell everybody real quick, what's some of the things you implemented as far as training at Everest?
So we went down the route of having a virtual reality crane simulator, which I think is a great resource and tool to have. And we started using it to gauge some of our operators as they were coming on board to become qualified crane operators, where, the virtual reality simulator with ITI has a scorecard. To me, similar to Amazon, right? You'll get a 1, 2-star, 3-star type deal as you go through each course. And I think it relates to the team members that we have as a younger generation in the workforce, right? They understand the electronics, they understand the games, so it's relatable. But as you go through each course, you're able to train on it. And it gives you a score to say you're at a 1-star, 2-star, 3-star. And as you pass on, right, you go to the harder or more strenuous type crane operations. And I think it's proven tremendous results for sure.
Now, are you still doing like hands-on operator training too?
Yes. So we do have like a daily course of cranes and rigging that we develop with ITI as well, that goes through, overhead crane, inspections. What are some of the hazards? What are some of the things to look for? And, how we could be better at operating these dangerous assets.
So are you guys doing that with everyone or just the crane operators?
Well, I think back to what I said, with a slow progression. So we tackled first all of the new hire operators.
Okay.
And then we went into the maintenance personnel. As we've seen, that was the risk we were not covering, making sure some of our maintenance personnel that dealt with
because they're going to use the cranes during a downturn or what? Okay.
More than we realize, right? Maintenance touches them a lot more than we think.
Right.
So we started going after some of them and slowly, obtaining some of those previous operators that have been out there for quite some time. So it's just been a multi-front effort on getting some of these guys the hands-on and the virtual reality and classroom training that they deserve.
Is that going to be a one-time thing, or is that going to be an annual or semi-annual? Or
we've discussed like an annual type basis.
Yeah. Just doing refreshers and everything?
Absolutely.
All right, cool.
What do you think the future steel mill is going to look like,
Wow.
10, 15, 25 years from now?
Well,
automation.
Yes.
If you look at it historically across the board, right, you had an integrated mill, which is as big as a city, right? Literally, it's a city block. There are more. The one mill that I worked at for a while, it was, you pull in the contractor's gate, it was almost 2 miles to get to the furnace area. So, I mean, integrated mills were huge. And then in the late 80s, early 90s, you came into the mini mill, right? And that kind of shrunk that whole process down to where instead of employing, 10,000 people, you had, 500. To now you're at a micro mill.
Micros.
Yeah. And the micro mills, they're very, very specific, very focused on producing just what they need out the door. Like I said, it's smaller and smaller and smaller, but I think a lot of that has to do with what you just said, Chris, and that's the automation and everything that is being improved upon as far as the equipment.
Yeah, and AI is going to be huge. I mean, you look at some of the, without getting into, really specifics, but there's companies out there that tie in. I mean, everything. It's like we were talking about with the operational issues. I mean, they tie everything together. It's going to become so automated that obviously you can never do away with the people, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to become very targeted, very specific. A lot of this stuff is machine learning, all these programs that are coming out now, operational wise.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go in. There's a couple of shops I know now that we were kind of joking about. If you guys lost your automation, could you still operate? Do you have the people or the knowledge? Could you still operate? No. Typically, the answer is we probably could, but we're not going to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's a good thing. I mean, it's from a safety factor, but also from an efficiency factor. I mean, it's going to become, automation is just, that's the way it's going to be. And like Jim spoke to, a lot of these mills too are becoming, they're very targeted in the markets that they're going after, product wise and logistics wise. They're putting these mills in for specific reasons, specific locations, and targeting certain markets.
Do you know how many acres Everest has?
Oh, I couldn't tell you the acreage. That's huge.
Oh yeah, it's monstrous. Do you know when was it started? Do you know?
The mill itself?
Yeah.
Oh man, I think we just celebrated our 150th anniversty.
Wow.
Last year.
Yeah. So I mean, the place is massive, right? So that we were just talking about that earlier. Just the history that's there, right? Because the one building, you know, thinking that Carnegie was there, right?
Yeah.
Back in the day, it was just like I said, that was just amazing.
Sense of pride, I think,
Yeah.
you know, being, you know, involved
Exactly.
with stuff like that. And that's the reason why I'm still in the steel business is, you know, the people that you meet and the things that you're around and the projects that you get to be involved in are things that, you know, touch people and touch families and, you know, could potentially touch generations when you really think about it.
Yeah. When I left the mill and went to the crane service company, you know, for years I had people asking me, well, you know, I guess you don't miss the mill, and that was the thing, right? You really didn't miss. You miss the environment of the people, right? Yeah, but like I said, steel kind of gets in your blood a little bit, but like you just said, the people is what really drives that whole culture. It's the get it done kind of attitude. Don't mess with it. Just fix it. Go make steel. Like you said, it's awesome.
Well, you know, I think we've all joked about it. Steel industry itself, it's a huge, massive industry, but the family is really small. It's the same group of guys.
Same guys.
You just, we rotate, right? I was on the steel side, then I was on electrode side. Now I'm with Mozilla. And once and like Jim made a good point, you get it in your blood, and it's addictive. You can't get it. It's almost like you can't get away from it because there's never that. The cool part about these jobs too is to go see the latest and greatest technology that's coming out. And then of course you have some facilities where you go back and it's, you know, unfortunately they're not upgraded yet, but you can see comparisons and you get to look at everything, but you still get to be a part of the steel industry. And that's really, really cool.
Pride.
It is pride.
Thank you for joining. So be sure to visit evrazna.com. That's EVRAZNA.com. And as always, you can get a hold of myself, Jim, Chris, or any of our other experts at MozellaCompanies.com. Don't forget to pop into our learning center. We have a ton of information there. Subscribe to Safety Factor wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also watch it on the Lifting and Rigging channel on YouTube. My name's Ben. Stay safe out there.